Yeah! Now we're back this time.
Those were up, and they did.
We're smart, and my...
He told me enough.
No, I.
Here's Chuck.
Hey everyone, it's Don G. Corleone here, and I'm here with a brand new movie review. And this movie review is going to be for the, I think, what is it? Ninth film of this saga that I'm currently reviewing, and the third installment of the second phase of this saga. And that's of course going to be for none other than what we easily can consider to be the best solo MCU movie to not be a crossover or not be an Avengers film, and the best second installment of the MCU, the best second installment of the Infinity Saga in general, and that's going to be none other than the second installment of the Captain America trilogy, 2014's Captain America: The Winter Soldier, aka the very first MCU movie to be directed by the Russo brothers. So what's the plot of this movie? Well, for Steve Rogers, awakening after decades of suspended animation involves more than catching up on pop culture. It also means that this old-school idealist must face a world of subtler threats and difficult moral complexities, especially after saving New York in the Avengers. That becomes clear when director Nick Fury is killed-ish by the mysterious assassin, the Winter Soldier, but not before warning Rogers that S.H.I.E.L.D. has been subverted by its enemies. When Rogers acts on Fury's warning to trust no one there, he is branded as a traitor by the organization. And now a fugitive, Captain America must get to the bottom of this deadly mystery with the help of one of his comrades, Black Widow, and a new friend, Sam Wilson, aka the Falcon. However, the battle will be costly for the Sentinel of Liberty, with Rogers finding enemies where he least expects them while learning that the Winter Soldier looks disturbingly familiar. So how was this made? Well, in April 2011, before Cap the First Avenger was released in theaters, screenwriters Christopher Marcus and Stephen McFeely announced that Marvel had already hired a duo to work on the film's sequel. In September 2011, Chris Evans said that a sequel might not be released until 2014. Then in January 2012, Neil McDonough, who played Dum-Dum Dugan in Cap the First Avenger, mentioned that a sequel would likely be filmed after the completion of Thor the Dark World, which will likely have been before the end of 2012. Then by March 2012, Marvel whittled down the possible directors for the sequel to 3 candidates: George Novi, F. Gary Gray, and brothers Anthony and Joseph Russo. Walt Disney Studios announced the planned release for the sequel to Captain America: The First Avenger for April 4th, 2014, and Disney even said the second installment would pick up where The Avengers leaves off. Which makes sense, because Cap didn't wake until 2011, so there'd be no reason to be setting it in the 1900s. Where Steve Rogers would continue his affiliation with Nick Fury and S.H.I.E.L.D. and struggles to embrace his role in the modern world. Marcus even later elaborated that he thinks S.H.I.E.L.D. is the water Rogers is swimming in. It was definitely a Captain America movie, where, if the first movie was a movie about the U.S. Army, then this is a movie about S.H.I.E.L.D. You learn about S.H.I.E.L.D., you learn about where it came from, where it's going, and some of the cool things they have. And then, however, around April, F. Gary Gray withdrew his name from consideration because he wanted to go direct to film straight out competition instead. And then apparently the writing had begun in the middle of 2011, around the release of the first Avenger, with him and Marcus rooting on in hopes that there would be a second one, and they did a lot of just throwing stuff at the wall and seeing that what stuck. In the first few months of writing were a back and forth process with Marvel, and after the outline was finished, the story did not change much. They opted to set the story in the present day, and after experimenting with flashback elements for more period World War II stuff, decided to abandon the flashbacks as it became unwieldy, and the film would be Cap versus the world we all live in today, and even averted excessive comedy regarding the hero's time displacement. Because Marcus considered the captain the most adoptive man on the planet, and the tone would be more grounded in reality despite the advanced technology to contrast the fantasy elements from both the first Captain America and the Avengers. Despite that, the comic origins guaranteed that the film would have no verisimilitude, and this still proved a challenge the reveal of Anna Mazzola, who had been extensively rewritten to convert how the grounded espionage of paranoid thriller suddenly screeches to a halt, and they would switch gears really quick with the Ghost in the Machine and introduce more science fiction elements. The Marcus and McFeely even wanted to adopt Ed Berkman's Winter Soldier storyline from the comics, which they described as the tone of Cap's modern franchise. But it took the duo 6 months to convince themselves they could do it. Then in the meantime, while thinking of how to progress from the war film tone of the first Avenger, the writers settled on the conspiration genre for the screenplay and cited the 3 Days of the Condor, the Parallax View, and the Marathon Man as influences, feeling it better conveyed Captain America's trust issues and contrasting values in the new world that he would be living in. Marcus even said that if they put the 1940s man in present day, geopolitics, everything is going to seem like a conspiracy. And it's just going to seem dirty and underhanded and shifty, and people wouldn't be telling the truth. And then 3 Days of the Condor in particular was used as the main source of the script structure, following the idea that the protagonist is being chased by a threat they, along with the audience, only discovered halfway throughout the film. So anyway, after the film was shot and marketed, Captain America the Winter Soldier would go on to premiere in Los Angeles on March 13th, 2014, and was released in the United States on April 4th, 2014, as part of Phase 2 of the MCU. And after some duds in Phase 2 to start off, how did this one get received? Well, this film became a critical and commercial success! It received praise for the performances and the action sequences, and it grossed over $714 million worldwide at the box office, and it became the 7th highest grossing film in 2014, and received an Academy Award nomination for Best Visual Effects. Well, that's predictable. A sequel, which was Cap Civil War, which should be called Avengers Civil War, was also directed by the Russos and would be released in 2016, 2 years later. That kicked off Phase 3. Now as for my reaction, well, I had to say, before Infinity War came out, this was probably the best MCU movie of all time. Heck, it's the best of the solo MCU movies, and it always will be. This basically saved the Infinity Saga after a downer it went on in 2013, and I'm glad they went a more grounded thriller tone with this movie. There's hardly any comedy in this movie. In fact, there's kind of zero. After like the first scene, there's like zero comedy. Zero. And you even connect with some characters more here. Like overall, this was like a huge improvement on the first Captain America movie, which was also great. I venture to say I also liked this more than the Avengers. Like, Chris Evans even gave us a wonderful performance as Captain America. It was the most action comic film I'd ever seen. The film has a heart. It is entertained, fast-paced, full of actions. Samuel Jackson did a wonderful job as Nick Fury. And finally, his character did something to do in this film, like fighting with assassins and so on. I love him in this film much better than I did in the Avengers and Iron Man 2. And like this, and of course, loved him a little more than in Age of Ultron. In this film, he has everything in it. Scarlett Johansson also did an even better job as a supporting cast of Natasha Romanoff here, and was a good supporter to Cap. Like, in Iron Man 2, she was just kind of introduced. The Avengers, she was just there. In this film, they actually give her a role, and I enjoyed watching her in this film on screen. And this is even the most wildest, most colorful team of superheroes ever brought to life on the big screen. It's a massive success, and it's a fan favorite critical darling. Winter Soldier's like this tense, dramatic conspiracy thriller that somehow makes its strangest comic book elements work wonders. It's massively conceived and executed sequel that takes Captain America, and along with a few months later, Guardians, the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe, in a bold, exciting direction. Both were outstanding films released in the same year. Both boast astonishing confidence, production design, action, and visual effects. Both are even terrific fun. Both represent a brave new world for comic book movies, each one for completely different reasons. What was Marvel's crowning achievement? Like, how do you even compare the two? Like, answer, you don't. Other than ranking the films by personal preference, it's a full errand to pick Cap, Black Widow, and Falcon against the Guardians, so You sit back and think to yourself it's good to be a kind of a geek, soak it all in, and wait for the inevitable Avengers crossover. You love them both, you watch both of them over and over and over again, like enjoy each one on its own terms, like. Now, yeah, while Guardians of the Galaxy was also a phenomenal film that I'll get to in another review, this one is just a kick-ass best film ever. Like this movie is exactly what it is. It's a perfect 10. It takes Vision one of the most imaginative directors on Earth, and what I love, and the character of Steve Rogers is even better here. What I love about the character is that Steve Rogers has this "I'm a man out of time" issues. He's comfortable with the chaos that it brings, and even kind of in accumulating himself to this century, he's at his best. Like, most people would be overwhelmed, but because of who he is and where he's from, he's able to cope and adapt. The serum that gives him his physical edge also gives him his mental boost. It's his emotions that are raw and unaided. And time has even passed since Avengers, so we don't get to see his day-to-day amazement and adjustment. I'm glad they kind of skipped that stuff, though. What we do see is the man who once represented America has become an alien to America and its slanted values. The passage of time even, and add those struggles to a full-blown conspiracy film, and what results might just be it might easily just be one of the best films released all year in 2014. Steve Rogers kind of is just this John Wayne American. Like, the world shifts to him, and it's his job to tell everybody, like, that here's the way things should be done. We saw that in Avengers, and even the first film after he gathered his Howling Commandos. Now the powers that are to be are a lot more flexible in terms of loyalties, and now they're going to get certain jobs done. Now he handles this century's great mortalities at the heart of the film. And like most men from the 1940s, Steve keeps things to himself and keeps his emotions bottled up. Like, example, the first one where he mentions his mother dying of TB, and he was even embarrassed when Peggy found him mourning alone for Bucky. So, bringing the Black Widow into this film gives him someone who is going to draw out his story, because he's never going to offer it up on his own accord. And Natasha even learns from him, Fury learns from him, Sam Wilson even learns from him, yet they all give something in return. Every character used is utilized perfectly and smartly. Like Falcon, for example, is not in awe of the legend of Captain America. This is exactly what Steve wants in a friend and a fellow soldier. To not have to be Captain America. Everyone fits perfectly into the plot and allows access to different beats, tones, and emotional depth. Yeah, and yes, conspiracy thrillers need depth, and this one has it. Captain America is probably the only superhero left in this world and reboot who is similarly heroic. He doesn't have this dark, excellent quality like other reinventions. Plug that resolute goodness into a morally complex story means he doesn't question what he believes, but he questions whether anybody else does anymore. He doesn't question what his foundation is, but he questions where he has ended up and what his role must now be. The conspiracy element and structures of this story helps in that Captain America is not up to a pedestal being self-righteous. He's in a corner that makes you want to root for the guy, and he believes in what he's doing, and the viewer is along for a great ride sharing that belief. And now when it comes to some other stuff, like first off, the action and fight scenes in this movie are just awesome. There's plenty of action to keep you entertained throughout the entire movie. There's enough humor to balance all this. The characters all had their own amazing moments, and the acting is decent as well. You get to see more of Nick Fury, like I've mentioned before, and he's very awesome in this. Black Widow's even used much more in this movie, as well as being badass. She brings out more of the Captain story. Sam Wilson is even great and is involved in some great action scenes. And the villains in this movie were pretty good as well. Some were a little still generic, but still good. I even quite enjoyed the story as well. Like, there's a few twists, some unexpected, some expected, and the reveal of the unexpected twists in the final third were epic. The story is not just about Captain America and the Winter Soldier. There are darker forces at play that causes Captain to ask dangerous questions. Well, you know how I say, alright. Now, you guys remember when I reviewed the Avengers back in January, I mentioned my fictional self, who'd be named Harold. Well, I'm gonna say this. I did promise you guys I would mention him again. And that review is gonna be today. Here's how his plot would go. Like, Harold, ever since the events of the Avengers, Harold's been training in Washington, D.C. with S.H.I.E.L.D. And you're wondering where Grayson would be. Well, Grayson's off creating Franklin's memorial exhibit back in Maine. But when we all know how the plot of the movie happens, like, Harold would obviously also have to learn to be careful of who you trust and kind of what it really takes to kind of be an agent or Avenger or whatever you want to call it. So yeah, when it comes to that, Grayson wouldn't really have much of a role in this story, because I wouldn't really know where to put him. He wouldn't really appear till the final the final battle and stuff. That's when he'd appear. Now back to this review. Oh, and this movie belongs to the foreshadowing of a critical injury that would, not to mention, this movie even would be foreshadowing a critical injury that would happen to Harold that's not going to be mentioned until the Infinity War review, where he does get a gash on this arm during the twist where it's revealed that S.H.I.E.L.D. was hacked and that building explodes. I'm going to explain that injury a little more in the Infinity War review, which won't be till next month. Now back to this review. Now, the Winter Soldier is pretty much everything a Captain America movie should be. While it maintains some of the humor that now has become the trademark of Marvel films, the Winter Soldier is way more serious than all of them combined. And that is truly where the film feels so brave and, yes, different than any other super flicks we have seen. And which brings me to the most important point, the plot. While of course it's not going to be the most original or complicated film of the century, there's the basic screenwriting elements that so much lack for modern day blockbusters. Like you have the likable characters, a mystery they need to solve along with a racing clock. It's kind of like the 70s political paranoia thrillers like 3 Days of the Condor, or The Parallax View, Z. And it is a welcoming tone that makes the Winter Soldier to differentiate itself from the rest. There are strong scenes regarding political fear, control, and information manipulation, but it never felt bloated by overbearing. The purpose is to entertain, even if it manages to squeeze through a bit of political views, with Rogers replacing the viewer's choice on screen. At one point, there was even a talk about who is who, which results in every man for himself mayhem in one of the most interesting sequences of 2014. In today's world, we do not even get this stuff. Besides the charged plots, the introduction of new characters and the mega mayhem in the streets of Washington, D.C., the Russells even found time, and they should, to inject some sentiments in the proceedings. A visit from Peggy, even, a confrontation with Fury regarding S.H.I.E.L.D.'s actions, Bucky's memory recall, Natasha's kissing talk. They could have easily skipped these crap moments, but instead, the extra running time feels adjusted and coherent with a bit more characterization, which results to bring us closer to the on-screen counterparts. And I really even like that we have a scene of Steve Rogers visiting Peggy Carter at old age. Even she had thought he had died in that ice, but you could really feel the shock and emotional reaction when she sees that Rogers was actually alive and just got frozen in the ice. Like, you can even feel the emotion between both of them, and they realize that, with Rogers realizing that Peggy doesn't have much time left, so yeah, it's crazy. The action is even what took me by surprise. The bar's been set even higher now. It's unbelievable to think that these two directors of the Community fame came with such inventive ways of using Cap's shield. And finally, the shield even gets to be seen in all of its glory. In addition, all the fistfights, and there are many, are excellent examples of putting the glasses to the school of frantic edit with varied and rapid choreography. A terrific elevator fight sequence probably stands out as truly memorable, whereas the encounters with the Winter Soldier never feel repetitive. The Russell brothers kept changing the game from stealth and cloak missions, to car chases, to gunfires, to dogfights, to fistfights. There's something for everyone here. And it's arguably among the finest I have seen. Like, impressively considering their credits, real stunt work, like backflips, wrestle moves, somersaults, etc., and fights, and it is a pleasant sight to go away from superhero duels to the Avengers, Thor, and Iron Man. These characters rely on instincts of bullets. No more and no less, most of them do have some brutal moments for a PG-13 film. And they're not even afraid to show blood in this movie. I never expected an MCU movie at the time would actually show blood. This movie would even be kind of the closest you can get to an R-rated MCU film. Literally, this whole Captain America trilogy is kind of the closest you'd get to an R-rated MCU film. Now, once again, for the acting, as expected from Scarlett Johansson, Chris Evans, and Samuel L. Jackson, was even excellent. Robert Redford was impeccable in his role, and he was worth the effort that Marvel put in to get him on board. The rest of the cast all played their roles extremely well, and Marvel have done the right thing in bringing the Falcon into this movie, which was played well by newcomer at the time, Anthony Mackie. This would probably have to be... Sam Wilson's probably my favorite role from Anthony Mackie, if I'm going to be honest, and this movie is even a great political thriller too, and I must admit, even without the bonus of superheroes, the script and story is a great movie. Now, if I did have to think of some bad qualities, well, yeah. There's going to be some bad qualities with this film. I didn't really like they brought back Senator Stern because he was really unlikable and annoying in Iron Man 2. So I really did not think we need to see Senator Stern again. But it can sadly also be seen as a pretty sad cameo because this was pretty much the last time we ever saw Gary Shandling appear on screen before he passed away in 2016. Rest in peace, Gary. And while Robert Redford's performance was good, his villain was, well, generic. Like all of the MCU's villains most of the time. And I also don't like how Nick Fury gets very little screen time here, but I can let it slide because even though it seems like Nick Fury died, at least he ended up actually coming back, so I'm glad he didn't get killed off and he actually turned out to have faked his death was also a nice twist here. And I also did love Frank Grillo's performance, but I feel like more could have been a little done with this character here, but whatever, despite the bad qualities overall, Winter Soldier is a defining example of a masterpiece of Marvel and is exactly what we needed to regain our faith in the MCU and the best MCU movie since 2012's The Avengers. In the end, I highly recommend watching and buying this movie for sure because it's totally phenomenal from start to finish, and if you want to see Captain America in his next solo journey after you loved the after you loved the first Avenger, before the events of Age of Ultron would happen the next year after this movie released. Speaking of Age of Ultron, this movie has a perfect cliffhanger setup because we literally get to see two of the twins, like Maximoff twins, and Strucker and Loki Scepter, and it's a very chilling post-credit scene, and it's a perfect setup for Age of Ultron. Especially the final quote, "There's nothing more horrifying than a miracle," and Wanda smashes the blocks. Like, wow, that is a chilling cliffhanger. Now that's effective. It's a perfect setup for Age of Ultron, so I recommend watching and buying this movie for sure. Anyway, that's it for my review of The Winter Soldier, and if you're wondering how I'm going to rank The Winter Soldier, here's how I'm going to rank this movie.
So overall, if you want to bounce back to the good MCU after 2013 and want to see a more serious MCU film with a little comedy, then I would highly recommend watching this movie and then buying it and adding it to your collection for sure. And if you're wondering how I'm going to rank Captain America the Winter Soldier, I'm going to give Captain America the Winter Soldier a 10 out of 10.
There we go. That wraps up my review for The Winter Soldier. Now tonight, I gotta rewatch what was the introduction to another world of the MCU to not be on Earth, this time in space on a different planet, not on Asgard. And it was another formation of a team. Yeah, guys, I think you know what's next. And on the sad side, it is directed by a director I've lost respect for, but it doesn't kill my hate for but it doesn't destroy my love for the film, though. Till then, guys, that'll be it for this review. Thank you all for watching. If you like this and want to see more, don't forget to like, subscribe to Don G. Corleone.